to have a solid like pilot study. If we do it well, hopefully it can have some kind of harvest, have some kind of return. The investment of our time is not only to meet a requirement, but really have some purposeful return. One is to test and refine your research plan. So the major component, really the intellectual component of your research plan. And oftentimes we can use the pilot study to test it out and improve it. For example, develop and refine your research questions. You may have a set of research questions. You really need to test it out and see if those questions are actually worthwhile. And if you're really clear about what those questions are about and how you're going to answer those questions. Sometimes we feel we have a clear research question, but when you test data and collect data and you test it out, you realize actually the data doesn't answer that type of question. Or it's not that empirical question. You need to kind of reframe it and redefine it. And you may use pilot study to elaborate your research plan and the protocol. That's really about the whole process. Like for example, if you have like a mixed method study, and you may have data collection from this group and through maybe a survey tool, and then you want to have an interview with a few students or with a few participants, and then maybe even be on site in their classroom or sometimes like their like informal learning settings. You want to see what's going on. So you may kind of plan out these things in stages, but then you really kind of need to test it out, see if that's a good flow for you to collect the different pieces of the data and eventually kind of build the alignment or connectedness between different analysis. So elaborate the research plan and protocol is an important part of like can be an important role played by the pilot study. And developing and testing education intervention technology, especially if you're considering interventional study. Some of the studies are simply observational, right? You are there not to change how things work, but really to see how teachers teach, how online course work, and what's the roles played by various technology, how people use technology, but you're not creating it, and you only like collecting data to describe what's happening in the context. But if you are bringing in educational intervention, let's say in online courses, you really want to change how some online courses are organized, and you change how faculty really support students, especially students who found online learning challenging. And you are building on maybe some online tools to support that, or you're providing professional development to change how instructors teach. And that's going to be quite complex. The way we design intervention oftentimes is not exactly how things are going to work. So you bring in that intervention and really test out and purposefully collect data to see how you need to improve it. And assess the feasibility of a full scale study, whether it's feasible. You think you can send out, a recruitment, a survey invitation and get 100 people to participate, and then you realize, one, a lot of people never respond. Second, even if they respond, they only answer like maybe 5 out of your 20 questions. And those, sometimes it's just simply lack of interest. You need to find ways to better recruit and make it work. Other time, maybe there's some kind of a procedural things you need to better work on. So, feasibility study is important like role for the pilot study. And finally, part of a research plan is not only the things you work on, but also really like prepare yourself to work on that. And I found like oftentimes with my student and even myself, especially starting a new project, I just need to test water for myself and better understand like what kind of layered things I need to work on and what kind of research methods I need to better kind of be more knowledgeable about. and really like prepare myself for that scene, like even collaborating with teachers. How do I speak their language and start to get them understand my purpose and my interest, so that when we are working together, they know like what this research is about and how we get onto the same page to be productive in working together. And it's a lot of the soft skills and small things that we need to build and to prepare ourselves to be able to, for example, even do an interview, like to be able to ask the right type of question that our participant want to share. So anyway, so this slide is really about like the important research intensive stuff that we want to like work out through pilot study. Any question at this point? Good. Okay. So the second slide I think about pilot study is really about the more concrete stuff, more procedural stuff. And for example, important decisions about our study, about our research, to assess the sampling strategy, how many participants are needed, how do I sample, and recruitment method, how do I really get a participant to participate, and what's the ways to really reach out to them, and develop and test research instrument. We talk about that, observation protocol, interview protocol, and survey questions. Oftentimes, for each of this type, research instrument, we almost for sure need to pilot test first before we use it at a full scale. Otherwise, you will realize that you spend so much time finally get the participant to cooperate with you to respond to your survey, but that actually a lot of your survey questions are not clear to the participant, and they're not asking the information that you want to collect. So you want to like really use a smaller sample, like we sometimes even could be our friend, to help you test out the survey, to refine the survey questions and really clarify what you mean. And sometimes it could be changing the survey question format. Sometimes from an open question to a multiple choice. Other times it really could be changing a multiple choice question simply into open-ended. So I want to really see what they say instead of like marking out a choice, but actually doesn't mean much. And collecting preliminary data so that we can assess our data analysis method. Oftentimes that may uncover problems. We didn't think about, that particular type of data is so open-ended, so messy. And before I can even apply any data analysis methods, I have so much to do to sort out things, put them in the right format, so that I can start to code. It's not just getting the data and I'm ready to code. So all this, more like a procedural things to work out is very important for us to actually have a pilot study to really have a good plan. And the final slides is even more like logistic issues. It's not even so much like method issues, but really just the set of logistic issues to work out so that the research project can survive. And any like problem related implementation of the research, teacher cooperation, student motivation, and the school condition that we need in order to test out anything related to curriculum, instruction, technology, and time. Like when is the right time for that kind of research to take place in a school year? If you think about, doing something related to the curriculum, and how much time is it needed? It's really needed for you or for the participant, like a teacher, a student. It may require a lot more time than we originally kind of planned. And if that's the case, we have to kind of find ways to make it work. And resource. Do you need to pay the participant to get them motivated? And do you need some collaborator working with you on the data analysis? Do you need technology? Sometimes it's for data management, especially if we have multiple data sources. If it's not just a Google form survey, if we have multiple data sources, video, transcript, and even like across multiple semester, and then you really need to have a good way to manage your data. Where are you going to store the data? And how are you going to sort out the data? Eventually, how you can connect the different pieces of data and create that map. And how you manage the data in a way that make it easier for you to analyze data, but also meet the requirement of IRB related to privacy, right? So all those like detailed things to work on. And I also want to like really encourage you guys as you work on your research project, think about like a research funding. If you need a small, like a small amount of money to make your like a research more doable on campus, there are a few funding program. For example, I'm not sure any of you have applied the Benevolent Association Research Fund. Only like I think $500, but can cover stipend for participant. Or for example, if you need a teacher to collaborate with you, devote so much time beyond their work, and you can give them some compensation. And there are a few other like opportunities to apply funding on the list. For example, if you look at your opening research this link, there are a few like a funding opportunity for grad student. And more like a national and competitive doctoral research programs are out there. One is the Spencer Foundation working with National Academy of Education. Very, very reputable. If you're like aiming for getting into academia, especially applying for faculty positions, and having a funding program like this on your record is going to be very like prestigious. And AERA has a dissertation grant, mostly for, I think, for quantitative studies. But you can check it out. So that's a more like a broader like a reflection on how we really use telestudy for the purpose of enhancing our research project. Now I'm going to shift towards the more concrete stuff for like how we do our telestudy in our doctoral program. I know this part, different department may work differently. You can, for your department in education psychology, I don't know the specifics, but here's mostly for our ETAP guideline for how to do and report our telestudy. So when do you need to do your telestudy? I know in the beginning, a few of you already talking about this. In our program, here are the milestones. You have initial coursework, 12 credit, and then you do the gateway review. And that's like a mini version of a literature review, but position you towards a particular research direction. You do not need to work out the research methodology section for that. And then you have more coursework, including 4 inquiry courses that can help you meet the requirement of inquiry tool exam. And then you have more coursework working to finish all the credit you need, 63 credit, including your advanced standing or any credit you transfer in. After you have finished that 63 credit, that's the time for you to finish the doctoral comprehensive exam, which is in the form of a telestudy. And from there, you're going to move on to the dissertation phase of your doctoral study, working on the proposal first and then dissertation. So you see the telestudy is really a milestone for you to get ready for the dissertation phase. And in the telestudy, what do you need to do? One is an introductory statement. this is a particular piece of writing. You will be reflecting on how you have developed through the doctoral study from the initial interest that you brought in to the program to formulating a clear research direction for yourself leading towards your dissertation, and how you have been preparing yourself along the way to read the literature, build the theoretical foundation, and purposefully learning and sharpening the research skills. And also provide some basic background information about this pilot study. What's it about, how you have conducted, and why you want to conduct that pilot study, and how it may prepare you towards your dissertation. So this is like an introductory statement, providing an overview for the real pilot study. And then it's the real completed pilot study. It will be presented first as a research paper, and then a public presentation. So research paper, double space, no more than 30 pages, excluding references and other stuff. And so it's a research paper, which means it's a report of an empirical study. And then the presentation, we have been quite flexible with how many minutes you can use, but the guideline is for you to present it like a ERA presentation, like a 20-minute, and then as Q&A. So, there you can see the specific guideline in the doctoral handbook. And then how is your pilot study evaluated? This is the basic rubric provided in the doctoral handbook, not in the particular format, but basically this 4 criteria. Based on your presentation in the paper and in your oral presentation, we want to see, 1, do you have adequate or solid knowledge about the area of inquiry that you're researching? A particular research topic, a research field. Show a clear sense of the literature, build on the related theories, and formulate a conceptual framing of your research topic. And then in the writing and in your presentation, you show a clear flow of reasoning to really reason from the problem to your understanding about it, to the research gap, and to your research goal, research question, and how you will be actually investigating your research question. So this is like not only the content of knowledge you have, but also the reasoning you demonstrate through the paper. And then like a knowledge of research methodology, which is of course essential to your future dissertation research. Show a clear, coherent research design. So the data sources and analysis will effectively address your research question. And competence in carrying out real research work. So you can document your data collection process well, and you have a clear process to conduct data analysis and use the data analysis to develop claims and really like a support the claims. So this is like the data and insight or claim conversation, making sure that your data analysis can support your claim. And then you can present it well in oral and written format. So this is like a particular like a rubric, but underlying this rubric, I think this is the generic kind of criteria for evaluating our research. It's really like a few things or criteria that is essential for us to think about our research work. 1, clarity. 2nd, coherence. And 3rd, but actually very important, is creativity. Is there something new? Is there something like you're contributing to this body of literature or to the field? So I oftentimes use this chart for our graduate student to think about organize our research work. And so you have research goal, you have research framing, and you have a set of research questions. Then you can think about how each of the research questions will be investigated using particular data source, particular type of data analysis method you apply to it, and think about what will be the output of it. And then like what kind of answer will be generated through this analysis. And what's new as you work on the data analysis, keep asking yourself, what's new here? What's interesting here? And what's maybe significant? Eventually when you write, that's basically the discussion section. And you really get to develop a takeaway message related to your research question. Okay, I think this one is the last slides. Just a few like specific suggestions for how you may work towards. Let's see that your Adil is asking you to post your question if you have any. For this, you're gonna have questions. And so one is to consider conduct exploratory pilot study early on in the program. And I hope that the pilot study milestone is not going to be your first experience of doing study. Along the way, in the coursework, or maybe outside the courses as your personal research, consider opportunities to test things and pilot testing the different research instrument. 777 is a good place, and 778. In 826, a more advanced version of mixed method design-based research course that I teach is also a good place. 890, independent study course. I think that's if you want to devote some time in a semester for research experience, I think it's really good to have an independent study course under 890 with your advisor. And try to access the site of a research early on. If it's a classroom, online course, program, some other times it could be informal learning settings at work, at home, in libraries, and you try to be there, see how you can test out things. And attend and present at conferences is oftentimes a very good experience for you to prepare for your study and for your presentation. And read research journals and pay attention to the flow of writing there. And then especially how the papers are formulating research questions and documenting research method section, and how the results are presented, especially across multiple like data sources, to really like systematically be systematically presented, but address the research questions. So I will stop here for now, and we can have some time for discussion. And I have some other resources to recommend, but that's after our discussion.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Zhang. That was really helpful. So for now, let's just go to everyone. If you have a question, just use the raise your hand feature, or you can just raise your actual hand or type in the chat. And I know we had one question. Maybe I'll start it off with that. That was already from the RSVP form. And it was basically about somebody had a situation where they had, like, you had just mentioned this too, Dr. Zhang, like 75 participants at the outset of their study. And then just based on people following through to the end, not responding to things, now they only have like a handful and they're not really sure like what to do. So I don't know if that person is here and they want to elaborate, if they want to remain anonymous, that's fine. That was Robin. Okay, so Robin, why don't you lead us off then?
Okay, so saying that I had 75 participants is generous. I had a pool of 75 possible participants from some, and I'm using convenience sampling for the pilot. I'm using, it's kind of teacher research, but not exactly, because they're no longer my students. But they're students that I still had access to through email addresses. There were about 70 that I still had email addresses for who fit into the criteria for the research. And I sent out a blast figuring, okay, I'll send out this request and 70 people, I'm sure I'll get 15 to 20 people and that'll be great. And I got 7. And from those 7, I sent out the consent forms and I got 5 consent forms back. And then I sent out the surveys and I got 2 surveys back. And I sent out, I really pushed the surveys again and I got 1 more. But I think that I might be at the end of what convenience sampling can get me from that particular pool. I want to move forward with that and say, that's fine, everything's great, but I'm a little worried that that's going to not undermine the credibility of my research, but undermine the credibility of my process. I don't want to, I guess if I address it in the discussion that, hey, I just learned that I don't want to do convenience sampling. If I address what I'm learning from this, I guess that it would be okay, but I don't know if I'm right about that. So I would really like some feedback on that.
Yeah, sorry to hear about that process. I know actually it's actually can be very typical, especially nowadays during the pandemic. I know a lot of people are not feel low to be doing things that's optional, and almost a lot of people are just doing their things they have to do, and anything additional seems to be a stress. I think it's hard to get a research participant. My sense that it really depends on your research question and the research method. If it's a multiple choice type of survey, then only having a 4 or 5 participant probably is too small. If your survey have open-ended questions, and the open-ended questions seem to be rich enough for you to do qualitative analysis, then that may give you enough data for a pilot study. The other would be if the survey is your only data source. If you're considering for example, survey is only part of my data collection. I have, for example, observation. I have analysis of their artifacts, of their written work. I'm not sure if you're doing writing, reading kind of work. I'm collecting their writing samples.
Yeah, I've got the survey. I'm doing a follow-up interview based on, it's an open-ended survey, follow-up interview, and optional writing samples. So I've got multiple sources. That
sounds better. I think if you can get the few students sit down with you for interview, and especially having their written work or learning artifact, and maybe because of the limitation of the survey data, and you can think ahead about how you may structure the data collection using interview and their writing sample, maybe making sure the data collection in those categories will come stronger. So it's kind of balance out. You do not have a large sample, but you can go deeper, right? Yeah, that's what I think you can do. But hopefully, this can help you think about for your dissertation study, you can think about how you can better motivate the participant.
Thank you. That actually is really reassuring.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Robin, for starting us off. Fran, go ahead.
I have a question. So I've done my data collection and things didn't, your sentence about risks and uncertainty So I took a risk and it was uncertain and it didn't go well. It didn't go the way I was hoping things would go. So I'm presuming I'm going to include that in my paper. This is what I did, and this is why I did it, and this is how I thought things might go, and this is how they actually went. And here's why I think they went the way they did, and here's how I might try something different when I move towards dissertation work. Is that appropriate to put the problem into the paper?
I think it's reflection on the uncertainty of that research project is a good reflection. Although if you are submitting it for the milestone, because of the criteria of evaluation, really look at your research methodology, right? Let's say if your data is just simply too thin to do meaningful data analysis, and based on that small sample of data, it's even hard for you to demonstrate your research analysis method. Let's say grounded theory coding. And when the data size is too small, it's not only limit the power to answer your research question, but also for the committee to even assess your capacity to do research. Then it will be problematic, right? So I think if it's just simply a too early, too small for you to be able to access the data, and then probably can build on that to do your phase 2 of your pilot study.
No, it wasn't that the data wasn't sufficient. It was what I was hoping to be able to observe didn't quite happen. Stuff happened, but not exactly what I thought was going to happen.
I think that could be actually a reasonable, I think probably good opportunity even for you to really think about the what you want to achieve through that data analysis. I'm not sure, what are you considering, a grounded theory qualitative study?
You are muted.
Sorry. I'm working with a framework that already exists, and I was trying to test that framework with a nuance. And so, but the nuance part didn't go exactly the way I thought it might go, which is revealing in and of itself, though, I think. But then if I test this again for the dissertation, I have a sense of how I need to change how I access that information next time. I'm not sure if I'm making sense.
Yeah, this is the research, over the research process, there is a surprise. You thought that's what the kind of data you're going to have, but actually when you have the data, you realize it's something different. And I think it's a critical reflection. I would say, one, try to reflect on that data collection process. And is the data valid and reliable, right? The reliable, I put in quote, if it's your qualitative study, the reliability is not the repeated measure kind of a reliability. But is the data collection process well implemented, and did the participant generate the type of data in meaningful way, right? If it's really come out of a meaningful process, then we should respect what the data tells us. And then if the data is meaningful and solid enough, but we are seeing something different, I think that's actually a good problem, because oftentimes if you look into the data, it may give you the insight that's simply different from your original framework, whatever framework you apply. And you can really look into what's different, what's unique, and what's like out of the scope of that framework, and try to like build the kind of theoretical lens and theme and dimensions out of it. And possibly the original framework really overlook some of the stuff that you're seeing. And you need to kind of build on that and consider ways to like maybe add like an additional dimension, maybe like a highlight how that framework can be adjusted, right? But really use your data to support that argument. That's actually going to be a really interesting paper if you can make that push.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's not a failure, right? If it's a did the collection fail, like really like I didn't get the student simply interview, when they say something, they're not seriously like engaging. My interview protocols really didn't work, and my questions are misunderstood by my participant. That's the kind of procedural problem we need to address in the next round. But luckily, it seems that you're not, that's not the problem you're facing. I think you're facing a good problem.
Doesn't feel that way, but yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Any
thank
other-
you so much, Fran. Oh, go ahead. Caitlin, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Hi, so my question is basically about if my research is going well, like I've done data collection, I like it. And I'm wondering in what way that usually, if at all, gets incorporated into a dissertation, or if it's typical to just start fresh. It's a particularly, it's a stickier question with me because I'm working with kids. So with the pilot study, because it's all in class, I don't necessarily, I got IRB exemption, but I wouldn't if it were going to be in any way published. So I'm wondering what the typical relationship is between those two.
That's a good question. I'm not sure if you know like a Jeannie Park. She finished her dissertation last summer, and a few of you may know her. She did her pilot study using like a smaller data set, and then build a full-blown dissertation research. But she considered her pilot study as her study one actually in the dissertation, because she was able to expand the pilot study analysis, actually make it quite rich. So that became her study one. And then she has a larger study as her study two. I think that that's oftentimes if you feel like the pilot study data analysis is telling you a lot, it's quite rich, I think you can do it that way. I read some typical kind of guidelines on how we position like pilot study and your full-blown study, and in some cases, the pilot study may not be able to use as part of your sample for real reasons. For example, people talk about like data like pollution. If you think you're going to follow up with this particular group of kids, because they already have experience with you, I'm not sure what kind of risk, depending on the research topic, especially if it's an interventional study. They already did some work with you in the pilot study, and now you're using them again, like for your full research. But actually their early experience with you in the pilot study will influence how they respond in the real research project. For that case, that will be problematic in the research design. You want to exclude them.
Yeah, I don't think that would be an issue for me necessarily. I'm studying a single class, and so I'll have new students in the next class.
Okay,
but,
okay.
Yeah,
that sounds like Jeannie's case too.
Okay.
Her later study is simply a different cohort, different group of students.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, sounds great.
Alejandra, go ahead.
So I have kind of, I think, a related question. I am trying to leverage the pilot for the dissertation and thinking of it as, as a pilot. So testing the instrument and testing the, sort of idea, but it's also quantitative and the pilot. And I'm thinking that this could be the quantitative component, and then I could sort of add on the qualitative component to complete the picture. And so I would identify subset of the people that I survey in the quantitative part, identify a subset to interview. And then that piece of it would be, I would follow, progress and follow the quantitative with the qualitative piece for the dissertation part. So I'm just wondering what you think about that, and does that work, do you think?
Yeah, I think that can work for meeting the requirement of the milestone. I think if your quantitative analysis, especially eventually you think about it's a mixed method, and that quantitative research is giving you some rich information, and it's relatively a larger kind of a sample, I bet, because you're using quantitative method. And you can generate, solid research report out of that data set. I think definitely it can, be used to meet the requirement of the milestone. Although, like for you, like for your development of your mixed method, I would encourage you maybe not reporting to the exam, the comprehensive exam part, but even like down the road, when you're doing your qualitative data analysis and doing interview, I bet you will need to somehow pilot test your interview protocol.
Oh, so to test that as well. Yeah. I mean, I could potentially, in the pilot, interview a couple of people, maybe.
Even just one student, really like a pilot test your interview questions.
Yeah.
But using that information, a single case interview, even if you don't have time to really like finish more.
Yeah, and the paper has to be only 30 pages, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
So the problem is that the more that I try to understand what I am looking at, the more I know that I don't know anything. And you go down a rabbit hole of reading, right? And it becomes more and more complex as you continue to understand what you're trying to understand. And I am just trying to get it done. And,
I know you have a lot. I know your research pretty well in the past. I don't know if you have new stuff done lately.
yeah, well, now I'm working on a whole new area that I sort of got interested in through the pandemic. I was observing online STEM faculty and some of the challenges that they were having in transitioning from face-to-face environments to the online environment. And I wanted to I started thinking about why is that, and I want to understand that better. And I started thinking, I've always been interested through all my papers throughout the whole 14 years. I keep on kind of circling around this notion of how personal epistemologies impact pedagogy. And so as I was looking at the STEM faculty, and then I started thinking about that particular lens, I started realizing that it may be that there are differences in in personal epistemologies that represent themselves in pedagogies that prevent STEM faculty from really understanding how to be in a learner-centered environment, whether or not it's face-to-face or online. But in my particular interest, it's online, right? So I'm really trying. So then I went down this whole rabbit hole. I'm in reading psychology, right?
Yeah.
And reading philosophy and trying to wrap my head around the work that's happened, and trying to understand all of the instruments that are out there now that will test or help you evaluate personal epistemologies. And it's just,
a lot
it's
of
daunting. It's daunting. I have spreadsheets and spreadsheets and spreadsheets of stuff.
Yeah.
And I just want to focus. And I think I finally have like a good idea, but it's completely different than what I thought initially. And it's a first step. It is truly a pilot to test instruments. But my bigger question is this question about epistemology and its impact on STEM online and pedagogy. But in order to get there, to answer that question, I need to make sure that the instruments are testing what I think they're testing. And it's complex when you're talking about, epistemology, for example. So yeah, I don't know. I'm doing one thing at a time.
Yeah, that sounds actually a very interesting direction. I know that sometimes we face different size of problems. Sometimes we just simply like are having difficulty collecting data. Other times, especially if you have been working on your project for a while and you realize that you have a lot of data, too much almost to decide like which part of it you want to focus on. And I think, if you're having a complex data set and setting up strategic research plans and directions and keep it at a manageable size is very important, especially during a doctoral study. And you want to make progress, right?
Yes.
And later you have a whole career, you can think about years of what you can do. But purposefully look at the high potential. Oftentimes, so-called like a promisingness judgment, right? Like you for your research product, it's not just one option. Even you have data set in hand, you realize there are multiple sides of it and multiple ways to analyze it, different research questions you can answer, and each has its own kind of potential. You kind of do the assessment, which direction is most promising in terms of give you something very interesting to report and seem to be solid and strong when you make the argument. And you want to focus on the most mature and most high potential aspect of the project first. And try to like narrow down and then push the other things like to outer layer for now. And do not even try to use those things to bother you too much. And simplify to a level that you want to have, a clear research design that you can implement. So that's a way to kind of be strategic in managing the product and make our, especially like producing progress in the program.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, Yang Yun, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to share my experience with Alejandra, because I also experienced the same process, because there are a lot of possible research question and related strategy and related the issue. So at the first time, when I developing my survey item for pilot interview, there are a lot of possible inventory, and I'm computing which inventory is suited for my understanding and suited for my research question. So someday Tom and other guided me how to focus on my research question and how can I delete it. And after I talk with Tom and other in our peer mentor group, I started to think about the durability, because I planned the state size survey with the instructor. Yeah, I thought, and the issue is very similar to you because I also interested in the transition experience of the instructors. And I thought I need to do some online survey, and this online survey require me to select a lot of items in my survey, because if I increase the length of size, the response rate should be decreased. So I trimmed a lot of survey items, and I tried to find the bad succinct or just one or two concepts to measure. So I think even though this process limited the theoretical horizon of my research, maybe pilot study, but it is very strategically useful to focus on just one or two things.
Yeah, I
Young-Yun-
think that
Oh, sorry.
you want to, yeah, you go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I'm happy that Young-Yun just kind of plugged the peer feedback and support group. This is a group that Tom kind of got started in ETAP Docs, and we're actually meeting tonight at 7. So it's, in case you don't know what that is, and I'll put the information in the chat in just a second. It's exactly what Young-Yun was talking about, kind of like we present a problem like Alejandra just did with her stuff, and you get some time to share about it, and then you get feedback from peers and also give feedback. And even if you don't have anything to present, it's a really great time to just listen and share ideas and kind of create that space where we might all find ourselves like talking over a cup of coffee, and in the old days in the old education building that we don't really have anymore. So yeah, so I'll put the stuff and the links and everything in the chat, but it's been really helpful for me and sounds like helpful for you too, Young-Yun. So
Yeah, sounds like a great way to like generate idea and get feedback from peers. I think having that group is actually a great way for ideation. I think, just to briefly comment on your question, I think a lot of the time that's actually an important part of your research navigation. When you have a lot of research like options, data collection tools, data analysis method, and especially with survey tools, I have been very cautious in selecting surveys and making sure, survey is relatively easy. It's still pretty challenging. I'm not kind of downplaying the difficulty, but it's kind of straightforward in the data collection process. But oftentimes, what that survey is really adding to the field sometimes is not that visible or not that strong. So if you're using a survey tool, definitely want to kind of find what's interesting about the survey questions that you can really pinpoint the significance of it, not just having a bunch of facts, right? Always kind of generate chart for the statistics, but almost like you can kind of assess if you have the different patterns. So what? What's the big deal of it, right? I think that gives us almost a kind of a criteria for weighing the significance of different survey tools. What can you get out of it other than collecting the factory information? Any other question? I know it's getting late and you have another event. If not, I can share a few resources, and later you can share the slides with the group on the website. If that's going to help others who cannot make today's workshop. Let me just share this slides with you. It's more for. I think I shared this in our 826 class, and it's a very interesting way for us to organize our reporting of empirical studies. It's called U is a beautiful shape for your journal article. I do not want to go through the detail. You can use this as a tool, as a guide for your writing. It's very detailed, actually. I just want to get a basic sense. I think even down the road, when you write your dissertation or like publishing your dissertation, this is a good way to think about how you're going to frame the whole paper. So basically, the writing for an empirical study is begin with general, and you gradually make the deep dive into your specific research question, data analysis, and finding, but also need to come out of the water. Don't get drawn there. And you will need to go through this process of make a deep dive, gradually come out, and you will guide your reader through the same process too. So the general level introduction is really the high point of this U. And then as you get to the body, the method, the question, the data analysis is really deep here, very specific, very detailed. And then, but you also have to come out of your data analysis to develop the takeaway message, your discussion, and your conclusion. You see, this is like a gradually move your paper, your writing, from introduction to literary review, deeper to your own study, and then your method, your finding, and you start to build the discussion and to your conclusion. So the introduction and conclusion section is really the time for you to speak to a broader audience. Not only the people who know your small research topic well is going to find interesting, but you really want to engage a broader audience. So there's a link also next to this slide. You're going to see a link there, give you some tips for authors, how you're going to build this U, how you tell your story. And there is even a set of guidelines from APA, not just the APA manual, but how to report different types of studies. I'm going to share that slide with you. So later, when you're really working on writing, you can use this as a reference. I'm going to finish there. Okay, any a final question or reflection before we wrap up?
I just want to say thank you very much for this, because I've been in serious anxiety mode of I don't know what I'm doing, and I have never known what I'm doing, and I am a complete fraud. What the heck am I doing here? And it's just nice to feel like, okay, I'm not as far off base as I thought I was. Okay, great. And this is some really good advice, and I appreciate it.
I'm glad you've shared that experience. You know, Einstein had that word, right? If we know what we are doing, we are not doing research. So research means to test the unknown, right? You got to have a lot of unknown, and gradually you figure out some things, not 100% for sure, but you feel like here are the set of things I still need to figure out, but here are the things now I come out of a clear understanding. Focus on those things, start to kind of share with others, where there are still a lot of things remain unknown. And that's a good feeling, and we should celebrate that.
All right, if no one else has anything to add, I just want to close with a couple things. I know we've put a few links in the chat. I'm going to send out this recording and this copy of the slides to everyone that was here, and it's going to be available on the website. So just in case you're not familiar, we do have a website. I just put it in the chat. That's our upcoming events, so you can see the ones that are coming up, which includes the Milestone Celebration. That is where, if you've passed any milestone or you just want to come and help celebrate your peers, May 11th, 11 to 1 in the Catskill building and online, we're going to be honoring some people who have passed either Gateway, Pilot, admission to candidacy, or completed the dissertation. So that's going to be really exciting, and we haven't been able to do that since 2019. But there's a couple other events coming up. Like I said, there's a couple peer feedback labs, and there's also the follow-up to this, which is the peer Q&A next week from 7 to 8 on Thursday. So all of that can be found at that link I just put in our chat. And yeah, so I'm really happy everybody showed up. Dr. Zhang, this was fantastic. So thank you so much for helping us out with this pilot workshop tonight.
Thank you for hosting. By the way, Adil's pilot study can be a good example when you share that peer-to-peer, like a sharing part. You can share some good examples of pilot study.
Thank you. Yeah, that's why you were on my committee for pilot
Yeah.
study, and now we're on my committee for
I remember.
the whole thing. So you can take a lesson from me if you do want to ask. I did something completely different and I wouldn't recommend it. So all of the questions about asking, like, how can I follow through it? That's a smart way to go, because I definitely did it the hard way. But all right, everybody, if you want to
Okay.
join us, see you at 7. If not, I'll hopefully see you around soon.
Thanks very much for organizing it, Alan. Thanks, Dr. Zhang.
Yeah.
It was
Bye
great.
bye,
Thank you.
everyone. Yeah, take care.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Have a good night.
Bye.
See you in a minute, Tom.